Ethan had always loved music. Even as a small child, he would hum tunes to himself, tapping his fingers on tables and chairs as if they were drums. But it was the piano that truly captured his heart. The first time he saw a piano in his neighbor's house, he was mesmerized. The way the black and white keys seemed to tell a story. The way a simple touch could create sounds that could make you feel happy or sad. It felt magical. From that moment, he knew he wanted to play, even if no one else in his small town understood why. But growing up in a place where everyone had similar dreams made things difficult for Ethan. Most of the kids spent their time playing sports or hanging out in groups chasing after what was popular. Music, especially something as serious as piano, was not seen as normal. The town had a small community center with an old, slightly out-of-tune piano, but few kids ever used it. Ethan, however, would watch the piano every time he passed by, imagining the melodies he could create. His first attempt at asking his parents for piano lessons didn't go as he had hoped. His father, a hardworking man who believed in practical skills, shook his head. "Ethan, you can't make a living playing the piano. You need something real. You need to think about the future." His mother tried to be kinder. "Maybe it's just a hobby, sweetie. It's nice, but don't expect too much." Ethan left the conversation quietly, but inside a small flame of determination grew. He didn't want their approval as much as he wanted to follow his own passion. At school, things were even harder. Kids noticed he spent less time playing sports and more time scribbling musical notes in his notebook, or quietly humming to himself. "Why do you always carry that notebook? Are you some kind of nerd?" one boy asked. Another laughed. "Yeah, who even plays the piano? It's boring." The teasing didn't stop there. On the playground, some would mimic him, tapping imaginary piano keys in exaggerated movements, making him feel small and strange. The laughter that followed was sharp, loud, and sometimes cruel. Ethan wanted to disappear. Despite the ridicule, Ethan didn't give up. He would sneak into the community center when it was empty, running his fingers over the keys and listening to the sound that made his heart calm. The piano didn't judge him. It didn't care about what the other kids said or whether he would ever become famous. The music was pure, and for a few moments he could forget the laughter and the doubts. Some days he would stay there for hours, leaving only when the sound of the wind outside told him it was late. His parents noticed his dedication, but they still worried. "Ethan, you spend too much time there. You need to think about school too," his father would remind him, but Ethan's response was always the same. "I will, I just need this, Dad, please." His mother would sigh, sometimes shaking her head, sometimes letting him be. They didn't fully understand, but they could see how happy music made him. That small happiness, he thought, was worth everything. At school, the teasing continued. Ethan became used to hearing laughter behind his back, whispers of weird kid following him down the halls. Teachers, too, had little faith in him. One teacher once said in class, "You should focus on something practical, Ethan. Playing piano won't get you anywhere." That sentence stung more than any teasing from his classmates. He wanted to stand up and argue, to say that music was real, that it mattered, but instead he smiled politely and walked away, holding his notebook close to his chest. Ethan's only comfort was a small group of people who understood, even slightly. His neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Lane, had once been a pianist herself. When she heard him practicing quietly in his backyard, she smiled. "You have something special, Ethan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words became a secret strength for him. When the world felt cruel and mocking, he would think of her, think of the piano, and keep going. One afternoon, the teasing escalated. Ethan was walking home when a group of kids blocked his way. "Hey, piano boy, are you going to play for us today?" one shouted. Another added, "Yeah, make us cry or something." They pushed him slightly and the notebook fell to the ground. He bent down to pick it up, cheeks burning. It wasn't the first time and it wouldn't be the last, but something inside him shifted. He wanted them to see that he wasn't weak, that he wasn't just some weird kid. That night, Ethan practiced harder than ever. His fingers moved over the keys with a new determination. Every note felt like a statement, every chord like a defense against the ridicule. He played until his fingers ached and his back was sore, but he didn't stop. The piano became a battlefield where he could fight without words, a place where his skill, not his appearance or popularity, mattered. School continued to be a challenge. Group activities were exhausting because everyone expected him to fail or be clumsy. Sometimes he thought about quitting. about pretending to enjoy sports or other activities just to fit in. But whenever he imagined a life without music, it felt empty. The laughter, the mockery, they were hard, but they didn't matter as much as the music did. Ethan learned to smile through it, to let the piano be his refuge. At home, he tried to teach himself more complicated songs from old books his neighbor had given him. Classical pieces, jazz arrangements, even some simple compositions he tried to create himself. Some nights he would sit by the window, listening to the wind and thinking about how the world outside didn't understand him. But he didn't need it to. The piano was enough. Every note was a tiny victory, every melody a step toward something bigger, even if no one else could see it yet. Ethan also started writing down his feelings in his music notebook. He put not just notes but small words about how he felt when he played certain pieces: joy, sadness, frustration, hope. The notebook became a diary, a place where he could be honest with himself. Even though the world outside was harsh, inside those pages he was free. Sometimes he would play a piece exactly as he wrote it, letting the emotions pour through his fingers. It was exhausting, but it made him feel alive in a way nothing else could. One rainy afternoon, Ethan's father peeked into the room where he practiced. "You've really been at this a long time," he said quietly. Ethan looked up, unsure of what to expect. "Yes, Dad," he replied. "I want to get better." His father nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his eyes, though he didn't say much. Ethan didn't need more. That small acknowledgement was enough to keep going. Despite all the teasing, Ethan never lost hope. Every laugh, every whispered insult, every doubting word became fuel. He imagined a future where he could sit in front of a piano and make people feel what he felt. Not for fame, not for approval, but because it was the one thing he could give that was entirely his own. And in that dream, the laughter of the bullies didn't exist. The small town continued its life, mostly unaware of the quiet determination of one boy who dared to follow music while everyone else mocked him. But Ethan's story was just beginning, and the journey that would change the way the town saw him, the journey that would prove that passion and talent could overcome mockery, was about to unfold. He would face obstacles, doubts, and even moments where giving up seemed easier. But the piano, his faithful companion, would never let him stop. And so, even as the world laughed, Ethan practiced. He played through tears, frustration, and exhaustion. He played when the wind was cold and the nights were long. Every key he touched, every note he struck was a quiet promise to himself that one day, the world would hear him. And even if they didn't believe in him now, he knew that the music and the heart behind it would speak louder than any mocking word ever could. Ethan's love for the piano grew stronger with each passing day. The ridicule from school didn't stop him. If anything, it pushed him to work harder. Every time someone laughed at him, called him weird, or mimicked him, he felt a quiet fire inside. He wanted to show the world that music wasn't just a hobby or a strange obsession. It was something real, something that could touch hearts. After school, he would rush to the community center. The old piano waited for him like a silent friend. Its keys were slightly worn and the sound wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. Ethan had long ago learned that beauty came not from perfection but from feeling. He would sit down, take a deep breath, and let his fingers move across the keys. Sometimes he played songs he had heard on the radio, but more often, he tried to play from memory or create something entirely his own. One day, while Ethan was practicing, the piano teacher of the community center, a kind woman named Ms. Reynolds, entered the room quietly. She had noticed him before, but had never spoken much. "You have a good ear," she said softly. Ethan froze for a moment. Compliments were rare, and he wasn't used to hearing them. I'm just practicing," he replied, almost ashamed. Ms. Reynolds smiled warmly. "It's more than practicing. You have talent. You need guidance, though. You can't do this all alone." Ethan's heart leaped. Finally, someone believed in him. Ms. Reynolds started giving him small lessons in the evenings. She taught him not just about scales and technique, but about expression, timing, and emotion. She encouraged him to feel the music, to imagine stories behind every note. Slowly, Ethan began to understand that the piano could speak in ways words could not. He wasn't just playing. He was telling a story with every piece. But progress wasn't easy. Some days Ethan struggled with pieces that seemed too difficult, and frustration bubbled inside him. There were moments when his fingers refused to move the way he wanted, when the notes didn't sound right and tears threatened to spill. On those days, he would sit back, close his eyes, and imagine the music he wanted to create. He would remind himself that every great pianist had faced these struggles. Patience, he learned, was as important as practice. At school, the teasing continued. Some classmates noticed his growing skill and laughed even more. "He thinks he's going to be famous. Look at him," they would snicker. A few tried to sabotage him, moving his notebooks or making fun of his carefully written sheet music. But Ethan learned to ignore them. He focused on the sound of the piano, the rhythm in his fingers, and the small victories of hitting a tricky chord or finishing a difficult piece without mistakes. The applause of the piano in his own heart became louder than the laughter outside. Ethan also discovered a way to express himself that went beyond the piano. He began writing little journals, jotting down thoughts, emotions, and dreams. Sometimes he wrote about the teasing, sometimes about moments of happiness, and sometimes about the music itself. Writing helped him process everything. He realized that passion wasn't just about talent, it was about perseverance. About holding on to something when the world told you it didn't matter. One evening, Ms. Reynolds suggested that Ethan try composing his own piece. "You're ready," she said. "You've practiced enough. Now you need to create. Make something that is truly yours." Ethan hesitated at first. Composing seemed harder than playing someone else's music. He had to create every note, every pause, every melody, but he trusted Ms. Reynolds and decided to try. He spent nights scribbling notes in his notebook, trying different chords, listening to each sound carefully and imagining the story behind it. Ethan's first composition was simple, but it was his. He called it a journey through silence because it reflected his feelings of isolation and determination. He played it quietly at first, then louder, then with emotion, letting every note carry a piece of himself. Ms. Reynolds listened and smiled. "You've captured something real," she said. Ethan felt proud but also nervous. Could anyone else feel it the way he did? Could anyone else understand what he wanted to say? He decided to take small steps. When a small school event approached, he asked Ms. Reynolds if he could play his piece. She encouraged him, warning him that some people might not understand, but that was okay. Ethan felt both excited and terrified. The thought of performing in front of a crowd, especially one that had mocked him for years, was frightening. But he also felt a spark of courage, the kind that comes from knowing you've worked for something for so long that giving up is no longer an option. At home, he practiced relentlessly. Late at night, when the house was quiet, he would sit at the old piano and play for hours. He imagined the audience in his mind, the skeptical faces, the laughter, the surprise when they finally heard the music. Each repetition made him more confident. Each note strengthened his resolve. He was no longer just a boy who loved music. He was a young musician preparing for his first real challenge. But life wasn't without distractions. Friends at school continued to tease him relentlessly. Sometimes it was whispers in the hallway. Sometimes it was loud laughter in the cafeteria. "Look at him sitting there with his music notebook again," they would say. Some days Ethan felt his confidence waver. He questioned whether he would ever be taken seriously, whether the time he spent practicing was worth it. Yet when he touched the piano keys, those doubts melted away. Music became his anchor, his safe place where no one could hurt him. His parents noticed the change in him too. They saw him working late, practicing diligently, and pouring his heart into something that most of the town didn't understand. His father, who had once doubted him, started to soften. "I don't fully understand it, Ethan," he admitted one evening, "but I can see it makes you happy. Keep going." His mother, always gentle, encouraged him as well, bringing him tea while he practiced late at night. Their quiet support, even if incomplete, gave him strength. One rainy afternoon, Ethan had a breakthrough. He was struggling with a particular part of his composition, a tricky series of chords that didn't seem to fit. Frustrated, he almost gave up. But then he remembered what Ms. Reynolds had said. Music is about feeling, not just technique. Closing his eyes, he imagined the story he wanted to tell, the emotions he wanted to share, and slowly, carefully, he played the piece again. This time it flowed naturally like a river of sound. He smiled, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. Ethan's confidence grew. He began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could face the world. He still worried about the teasing, still felt the sting of ridicule, but he realized that those voices weren't stronger than his love for music. Every day he proved to himself that dedication, hard work, and passion could push him forward, even when the world laughed. With the school event approaching, Excitement and nervousness battled inside him. He spent hours rehearsing, imagining every detail, how he would enter the room, how he would sit at the piano, how the first note would sound. He practiced not just the music, but the act of performing, imagining the skeptical faces in the crowd and how he would win their respect, not through words, but through his playing. As the day drew nearer, Ethan felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. The teasing from school had not stopped, but now it didn't feel as heavy. He had prepared, he had practiced, and he had created something uniquely his own. The music was ready. The story he wanted to tell, the emotions he wanted to share, were all contained in the notes he would play. Ethan began to understand a new truth. Talent alone wasn't enough. It was the persistence, the courage to continue despite fear and ridicule, and the willingness to express oneself honestly that mattered most. He had spent months preparing, growing stronger with every practice session, every late night at the piano, every moment of doubt overcome. Now he was ready to face the challenge, to step into the spotlight and let the music speak for him. And so Ethan continued to practice, his fingers moving across the keys with confidence. The piano, once just an instrument, had become a companion, a teacher, and a voice for his heart. The teasing outside still existed, but it no longer mattered as much. He had something they couldn't take away: his passion, his dedication, and his music. For Ethan, the journey was far from over. The event would test him and the world might still judge, but he had discovered something more important than approval or fame. He had discovered the power of perseverance, the magic of creation, and the strength that comes from believing in oneself. And with every note he played, Ethan knew he was one step closer to showing the world that music and the heart behind it could overcome even the harshest doubt. The announcement of the annual school talent show spread quickly through the small town, and the news created a buzz among the students. It was the event everyone looked forward to, the one time of the year when students could step out of their usual routines and show off their skills. For most kids, it meant dancing, singing, or showing tricks and stunts they had been practicing for weeks. But for Ethan, it meant something far more personal, a chance to share the music he had spent months creating, a chance to finally let his piano speak louder than the words of mockery that had followed him for years. Ethan hesitated when he first heard about the talent show. He knew it could be the opportunity he had been waiting for, but he also feared the potential humiliation. The same classmates who had laughed at him in the halls would now be watching him perform in front of the entire school. He imagined them snickering, whispering, rolling their eyes. The thought made his stomach twist, yet deep down a spark of courage ignited. Maybe this was the moment he had been preparing for without even realizing it. He spoke to Ms. Reynolds about his idea. "I want to participate," he admitted quietly, almost afraid of her reaction. She smiled, her eyes kind and encouraging. "I thought you might say that," she said. "This is your moment, Ethan. You've worked hard, and now it's time to let others hear what you can do. Remember, they may not understand at first, but that doesn't matter. You're performing for yourself as much as anyone else." With her words in mind, Ethan signed up for the talent show. As soon as it was announced to the school, whispers and laughter followed him like shadows. "Did you hear?
Piano Boy is going to perform,"
someone shouted across the hallway. Another student snorted, "This is going to be a disaster. He'll be lucky if he doesn't mess up completely." The words stung, but Ethan refused to let them shake him. He had practiced too long, poured too much of himself into the music, to let the teasing stop him now. In the days leading up to the talent show, Ethan's life became a careful balance between school, practice, and preparation. He spent hours at the community center, going over his composition again and again, perfecting every note, every pause, every chord. He imagined the way the music would sound in the auditorium, filling the space, reaching the ears of everyone who doubted him. He practiced entrances and exits, how he would sit at the piano, how he would take a deep breath before starting, and how he would remain calm, no matter what the crowd thought. Despite all the preparation, the teasing never stopped. Some classmates even tried to distract him during breaks, bumping into him or making rude comments. One day, a group of boys surrounded him in the hallway. "Hey, are you sure you can even play for real?" one sneered. "Or is this going to be another one of your little jokes?" Ethan felt his heart pound, but he looked them in the eye and said nothing. Silence can be powerful, and the piano had taught him patience. He ignored them and kept walking, focusing on what mattered most. At home, his parents noticed his nervousness. His mother placed a comforting hand on his shoulder one evening. "You've prepared so much," she said softly. "Just do your best. That's all anyone can ask." His father, more reserved, nodded quietly. "No matter what happens, we're proud of you for trying." Their support, small as it was, gave Ethan strength. For the first time, he felt that he wasn't completely alone in facing the world. As the day of the talent show approached, Ethan's anxiety grew, but so did his determination. He practiced every spare moment he had, running through his composition until the notes felt like second nature. He imagined the audience's reactions, first skeptical, then gradually captivated by the music. He visualized the emotions he wanted to convey, the story he wanted to tell, and the pride he would feel when he finished. Each imagined scenario made him more confident, even in the face of the whispers and laughter he knew awaited him. The morning of the talent show, Ethan could hardly eat breakfast. His hands trembled slightly as he held his music notebook, even though he had memorized every note. He tried to calm himself by thinking about the months of practice, the late nights, the frustrations he had overcome. "This is my moment," he whispered to himself. "I've earned it. I've worked for it. I can do this." When he arrived at the school auditorium, he saw the crowd already gathering. The seats filled with students, teachers, and parents all chatting and laughing, waiting for the show to begin. Ethan's heart raced. He noticed the familiar faces, the ones who had mocked him countless times, smirking and exchanging knowing glances. He could feel their doubt, their expectation that he would fail. But instead of fear, he let it fuel him. He had a message to deliver, not words, but music. Backstage, Ethan took a deep breath. The stage lights were bright, the air thick with excitement and anticipation. He could hear the chatter of the audience, the sound of students warming up, the occasional clap for another performer. He closed his eyes and imagined himself at the piano, his fingers moving over the keys, the music flowing smoothly, carrying his emotions to everyone listening. It was a moment of calm in the storm of nerves and doubt. Finally, it was his turn. A stage assistant called his name, and Ethan walked forward, feeling the weight of every eye on him. Some students snickered, whispering jokes, while others watched silently, curious. He reached the piano, sat down, and took a deep breath. His hands hovered over the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the slight coolness of the black and white surfaces. For a moment, time seemed to slow. He was no longer the boy mocked in the hallways. He was a musician, ready to tell his story. As he pressed the first key, a soft, clear note filled the auditorium. A hush fell over the crowd. The music began to flow, each note carrying emotion, each chord telling a story. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the melody guide him. He played with all the passion and dedication he had nurtured over the months. The audience, at first skeptical, gradually leaned forward, captivated by the beauty and precision of his performance. The teasing faces were replaced with expressions of surprise. Some mouths opened slightly, unable to believe what they were hearing. The notes rose and fell, gentle and powerful, playful and serious, carrying the weight of Ethan's journey. The room was silent except for the piano and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of admiration. Every note seemed to touch something deep within the listeners, a reminder that talent and passion could shine even in the face of doubt. As Ethan reached the climax of his piece, the emotions poured from him, frustration, hope, determination, and joy all woven into the melody. He didn't just play the piano, he spoke through it, sharing a part of himself that words could never capture. The audience was spellbound, completely absorbed in the music. Even the students who had mocked him before were now listening intently, their expressions shifting from doubt to amazement. When the final note lingered in the air and slowly faded, silence filled the auditorium. Then slowly, the applause began. At first polite, then louder, growing into a wave of appreciation that shook Ethan to his core. Some students clapped so hard that their hands stung. Some teachers smiled with genuine pride, and a few even wiped away tears. Ethan opened his eyes and looked at the crowd. feeling a mix of relief, pride, and overwhelming joy. He had done it. He had spoken through music in a way that no teasing, no doubt could ever silence. After leaving the stage, Ethan felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. His heart raced, but a smile spread across his face. Ms. Reynolds met him backstage, her eyes shining. "I told you," she said softly. "You had it in you all along." Ethan nodded, barely able to speak. He had faced the fear, the ridicule, and the doubt and had emerged victorious, not just in the eyes of the crowd but in his own heart. That evening, the talk around the school was filled with Ethan's performance. Students who had once mocked him now whispered about how talented he was. Teachers praised his skill and dedication. Some classmates approached him cautiously, offering compliments, unsure how to respond to someone they had dismissed for so long. Ethan accepted the words politely, but knew that the real victory wasn't in their praise. It was in the knowledge that he had stayed true to himself and his passion. For Ethan, the talent show was more than just a performance. It was a turning point, a moment when the months of struggle, practice, and perseverance culminated in something real and undeniable. The music had spoken for him, proving that dedication, heart, and courage could overcome ridicule and doubt. He had not only impressed others, but had also proven to himself that his love for music and the countless hours spent honing his craft were worth every challenge he had faced. And as he packed his things that night, tired but elated, Ethan realized something important. This was just the beginning. The music had given him confidence, strength, and a voice. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more people who didn't understand, more moments of doubt. But he also knew that nothing could take away the fire inside him, the passion that had carried him through every mocking word, every lonely practice session, every moment of fear. The talent show had shown him, and everyone else, that sometimes perseverance and heart are stronger than ridicule, and that the music and the soul behind it could speak louder than words ever could. The weeks after the talent show were a whirlwind for Ethan. Word of his performance spread through the town like wildfire. Students who had once laughed at him now looked at him with a mix of awe and curiosity. Teachers whispered to one another about his dedication, and even parents stopped him in the street to congratulate him. But for Ethan, the moment on stage was only the beginning. He knew that to truly grow as a musician, he needed to keep pushing himself, to go beyond what he had already accomplished. At home, Ethan spent hours revisiting the composition he had performed at the talent show. Every note, every chord, every pause became an opportunity to refine his skill. He experimented with dynamics, trying to bring out emotions he hadn't been able to express fully before. He tried new techniques, practicing scales and runs until his fingers ached, determined to master each movement. Music had become more than a passion. It was a language, a way to communicate feelings that words could not capture. Despite the recognition he was receiving, not everyone was pleased with his success. Some students continued to whisper behind his back, saying things like, "It was just luck," or "He won't last." Their words stung, but Ethan had learned to separate himself from negativity. He had discovered that the opinions of others did not define his worth or his talent. He practiced not to impress, not to prove anything to anyone, but because music was a part of him. The piano gave him a sense of freedom and control that nothing else could. One afternoon, Ms. Reynolds came to Ethan with a surprising suggestion. "There's a regional music competition coming up," she said. "It's bigger than the school talent show. More people, more judges, and it's a real chance to be noticed." Ethan's heart leapt. The thought of performing in front of strangers was terrifying, yet exciting. I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. Ms. Reynolds smiled. "You've grown so much already. You've faced ridicule and fear, and you came out stronger. This is the next step." Ethan spent the next few weeks preparing for the competition. He worked tirelessly, learning new pieces, refining his composition, and practicing under pressure. Each day he pushed himself harder than the day before. Sometimes exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, but he reminded himself of why he was doing this: the music, the journey, the expression of himself through every note. It was worth every long hour, every aching finger, every moment of doubt. At school, reactions were mixed. Some students congratulated him and offered encouragement, while others continued to doubt his ability. "It's just another chance to fail," one boy said mockingly. Ethan learned to ignore such comments. He focused on the support of Ms. Reynolds, his parents, and the small group of friends who believed in him. Their belief, combined with his own determination, became a shield against negativity. When the day of the competition arrived, Ethan felt a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. The auditorium was much larger than the school stage, filled with students, parents, and professional judges. The noise and chatter made him anxious, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had prepared for this moment. Every hour of practice, every late night at the piano, every struggle and breakthrough had led to this point. Backstage, Ethan watched other performers. Some were singers, some dancers, some played instruments he had never seen before. The audience applauded enthusiastically, and for a moment, Ethan felt a pang of fear. Could he really stand out among all this talent? Was he really ready for this? He closed his eyes and focused on the piano, imagining the first note, the melody flowing through him, the story he wanted to tell. In that moment, his nerves calmed, replaced by a quiet confidence. When it was his turn, Ethan walked onto the stage. The bright lights were intimidating, and the crowd seemed endless. He could hear whispers and murmurs, curious about the boy who had become a topic of conversation after the school talent show. He approached the grand piano, its polished black surface gleaming under the stage lights. Sitting down, he placed his fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and let the music begin. The first notes floated into the auditorium, soft but clear. Instantly, the audience's attention shifted. People stopped talking, leaning forward, listening intently. Ethan closed his eyes and let the melody guide him. Every note carried his heart, his journey, his struggles, and his triumphs. The music was alive, full of emotion, full of life. He didn't just play the piano, he spoke through it. He told a story of determination, of hope, of courage, of someone who refused to give up despite the odds. As he moved through the piece, Ethan felt himself becoming one with the music. He no longer worried about the audience, the judges, or anyone who had doubted him. All that mattered was the sound, the story, the emotions flowing through his fingers. The notes rose and fell with precision and feeling, weaving together moments of tension, joy, sorrow, and triumph. Each chord, each pause, each delicate touch spoke volumes, telling the story of a boy who had faced ridicule but never surrendered to it. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with surprise. Some whispered to one another, unsure how to describe what they were hearing. Even the judges, seasoned professionals who had heard countless performances, sat in silence, listening with rapt attention. Ethan could feel the energy of the room, but it didn't distract him. It fueled him. Every note was stronger, every passage more expressive, every emotion more vivid. As he approached the climax of his piece, Ethan poured everything he had into the performance. Months of practice, years of passion, and countless hours of dedication culminated in a cascade of sound that filled the entire auditorium. He played with confidence, grace, and heart. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was a living, breathing expression of himself. Tears pricked at his eyes as he reached the final chord, letting it linger, letting it speak, letting it tell the story of his journey. When the last note faded, a moment of stunned silence followed. Then gradually applause began, soft at first, then growing louder and louder. The audience erupted in cheers, some standing to show their appreciation. Ethan opened his eyes, astonished by the reaction. He had never imagined anything like this. The people who had doubted him, the strangers who didn't know his story, were cheering for him. They had felt the music, and through it they had understood him. Tears of relief and joy ran down Ethan's cheeks. He bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the response. The judges smiled, whispering to one another, clearly impressed. Some students who had mocked him before now looked at him with newfound respect. Ethan had not only performed, he had transformed doubt into admiration, mockery into awe. He had proven that dedication, passion, and heart could overcome skepticism and disbelief. After leaving the stage, Ethan was met by Ms. Reynolds. She hugged him tightly. "I told you," she said softly. "You were ready for this. You've grown so much, and everyone could feel it." Ethan could barely speak, his emotions too strong. He had faced fear, ridicule, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, not just in skill but in confidence and self-belief. That night, as he reflected on the performance, Ethan realized something important. Talent alone wasn't enough to reach this moment. It was perseverance, courage, and the refusal to give up that had brought him here. Every hour spent practicing, every tear shed in frustration, every moment of doubt had been a step toward this victory. And now he understood that the journey itself, the growth and struggle, was just as important as the applause and recognition. The regional competition was more than just an event. It was a turning point. Ethan's story spread beyond his school, reaching the ears of people who had never seen him before. Invitations to perform at other events arrived, and even local news outlets wanted to hear more about the boy whose music had captured hearts. But for Ethan, the real reward was not the recognition. It was the knowledge that he had stayed true to himself, that he had let his music speak when words could not. In the days following the competition, Ethan continued to practice and compose. He experimented with new melodies, tried new techniques, and pushed his limits further than ever before. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a friend, a teacher, and a source of endless inspiration. He no longer feared ridicule or doubt, because he had discovered that the strongest validation comes from within. Ethan's journey was far from over. He knew there would be new challenges, new competitions, and new critics. But he also knew that he had the strength, the determination, and the passion to face them all. The music was a part of him, and it would continue to guide him, inspire him, and speak for him in ways no words ever could. And so, with renewed confidence and unshakable dedication, Ethan continued on his path. The boy who had once been mocked and ridiculed had transformed through perseverance and heart into a young musician whose music could touch souls, inspire others, and remind everyone that true talent, when combined with courage and passion, can overcome any obstacle. After the regional music competition, Ethan's life felt different, though he didn't fully realize it at first. The applause, the recognition, the excitement, they were all new experiences, but they weren't what mattered most. What mattered most was the quiet sense of pride he carried inside, the knowledge that he had faced fear, doubt, and ridicule, and had emerged stronger than ever. He had discovered a strength he didn't know he possessed, and it gave him courage to take the next steps in his journey as a musician. Back at school, things began to change. Students who had once mocked him now approached him cautiously, unsure how to act. Some whispered apologies, others offered congratulations, and a few simply nodded in respect. Even teachers who had once doubted him began to take his talent seriously. Ethan accepted their words politely but quietly, knowing that their opinions, while appreciated, weren't the reason he continued to play. He had learned that real validation comes from within, from knowing you've given your best and followed your passion no matter what others think. Ethan's parents, too, noticed the change in him. His father, who had once been skeptical, finally admitted, "I didn't understand before, but I can see how much this means to you. You've worked so hard and it shows." His mother smiled proudly, always supportive, but now more vocal about it. "Your music brings you joy, and that's what matters. Keep following your heart." Their quiet encouragement became a source of motivation for Ethan, reinforcing the idea that while the world might doubt him, there were people who believed in him and would always support him. With the regional competition behind him, new opportunities began to appear. Invitations to perform at community events, small recitals, and even private gatherings started to arrive. Ethan embraced them all, treating each performance as a chance to improve, to share his music, and to connect with people. He learned that music could create bonds that words often failed to achieve, and that through his dedication, he could touch lives in ways he had never imagined. Ethan continued to compose new pieces. Each composition was a reflection of his experiences, his emotions, and his journey. Some were joyful, filled with bright melodies that made listeners smile. Others were more introspective, reflecting moments of struggle, doubt, or sadness. Through music, Ethan discovered a new form of expression, one that allowed him to communicate not just notes but feelings, stories, and memories. The piano became more than an instrument. It became an extension of himself, a voice for everything he wanted to share. Though success was beginning to shape his life, Ethan never forgot the challenges he had faced. He remembered the days of ridicule, the whispers in the hallways, and the moments of self-doubt. Those memories weren't painful anymore, they were reminders of how far he had come. They fueled his determination to continue, to keep growing, and to inspire others who might feel out of place or discouraged. He wanted them to know that it was possible to overcome doubt and negativity with perseverance, patience, and passion. One afternoon, Ethan was invited to perform at a local music festival. The stage was larger, the audience bigger, and the stakes higher than anything he had experienced before. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families, students, and music enthusiasts filled the seats. Backstage, Ethan felt the familiar mix of nerves and anticipation. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the piano, but he took a deep breath and reminded himself of everything he had learned. The months of practice, the lessons from Ms. Reynolds, the countless hours spent perfecting each piece, they had all prepared him for this moment. As he sat down at the piano, the bright stage lights momentarily blinded him. He closed his eyes, visualizing the music, imagining the story he wanted to tell and letting the melody flow through his fingers. The first notes filled the auditorium, soft and deliberate, capturing the attention of everyone present. The audience fell silent, drawn in by the clarity and emotion of each sound. Ethan felt a wave of confidence wash over him. He was no longer the boy who feared ridicule. He was a young musician ready to share his heart with the world. The performance was unlike anything Ethan had played before. He combined his technical skill with deep emotion, letting each note carry a piece of his journey. The music told a story of resilience, hope, and determination. Moments of tension were followed by bursts of joy. Gentle passages flowed into powerful crescendos, and the melody painted images and emotions that the audience could feel, even if they couldn't see the story behind the notes. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the depth and authenticity of his performance. As the final chord rang out, a hush fell over the audience. Then slowly applause began, growing louder and louder until it filled the entire auditorium. Some people stood cheering and clapping, while others whispered in awe, amazed at what they had just witnessed. Ethan opened his eyes, overwhelmed by the response. He had not only performed, he had connected with people on a level deeper than words, proving that music could speak to the heart, transcending doubt, fear, and ridicule. After leaving the stage, Ethan was approached by several people who wanted to congratulate him. Some were young students who had once felt isolated or discouraged, inspired by his story to pursue their own passions. Others were music teachers and enthusiasts who recognized the dedication and talent behind his performance. Ethan accepted their praise humbly, grateful for the acknowledgement, but more importantly, grateful for the chance to share something meaningful. That evening, Ethan returned home exhausted but exhilarated. He sat quietly at his piano, reflecting on everything that had happened. He remembered the days when he had been mocked at school, the moments of doubt that had threatened to hold him back, and the long nights spent practicing in silence. All of it had led him to this point. The journey had been difficult, but it had shaped him, teaching lessons about perseverance, self-belief, and the power of following one's passion. Over time, Ethan's story became well known in his town. People spoke about the boy who had been ridiculed for his love of music, only to astonish everyone with his talent and dedication. He became an inspiration for other students who felt different or discouraged, showing them that with hard work, patience, and courage, they too could achieve their dreams. His success was not just measured in applause or recognition, but in the way he had grown as a person, learning to trust himself and follow his heart. Ethan continued to perform, to compose, and to explore new musical ideas. Each performance, no matter how small or large, was an opportunity to connect with others, to share a piece of himself, and to inspire. He never forgot the lessons learned from ridicule and doubt, that challenges could be transformed into motivation, that fear could be overcome with preparation and courage, and that passion, when nurtured, could create something truly extraordinary. In the years that followed, Ethan's dedication to music only deepened. He took on new challenges, explored different styles and genres, and pushed the boundaries of his skill. Every note he played carried a piece of his journey. The struggles, the triumphs, the quiet moments of reflection, and the unwavering belief that music could speak where words sometimes failed. The piano remained his companion, his voice, and his teacher, guiding him through life and reminding him of the power of perseverance and heart. Through it all, Ethan remained humble. He never sought fame or recognition for its own sake. He played because he loved it, because it allowed him to express what he could not say aloud, and because it gave him a way to connect with others. He remembered the boy who had once been mocked, the lonely afternoons spent practicing in secret, and the small victories that had led to this point. Those memories reminded him of where he had come from and inspired him to continue growing. One afternoon, Ethan visited the community center where it had all begun. The old piano still stood in the corner, slightly worn but full of memories. He sat down, placing his fingers on the keys, and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, a reflection of years of practice, dedication, and experience. As he played, he thought about the journey, the ridicule, the doubt, the encouragement of teachers and parents, and the moments of triumph. Each note was a reminder that perseverance and passion could overcome any obstacle. Ethan's story became more than just a personal achievement. It became a lesson for others. People realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to keep going, the determination to practice, and the willingness to face fear and doubt that made the difference. His journey inspired students, parents, teachers, and anyone who had ever felt discouraged or different. They saw that true success comes not from avoiding challenges, but from embracing them and allowing passion to guide the way. In the quiet of the community center, as the last notes of his music lingered in the air, Ethan smiled. He had come a long way from the boy who had been mocked in school hallways, the boy who had feared judgment and failure. He had discovered that perseverance, heart, and belief in oneself were more powerful than any criticism. The piano had been his companion, his voice, and his guide, leading him through challenges and helping him discover his true potential. Ethan knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new stages, and new moments of doubt. But he also knew that he had the tools to face them: dedication, passion, resilience, and the ability to let music speak when words could not. And as he played, filling the room with melodies that carried the story of his life, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not only proven himself to others, but more importantly to himself. He had discovered the power of following one's heart, and he knew that as long as he did, there was nothing he could not achieve. Ethan's story became a testament to the idea that no matter how harsh the ridicule, no matter how deep the doubt, the pursuit of passion, when combined with courage and perseverance, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. He had faced mockery, fear, and uncertainty, and had emerged not just as a talented musician, but as someone who could inspire others, who could show that dedication and heart were the true measures of success. And so, Ethan continued to play, to create, and to inspire. The boy who had once been ridiculed had grown into a young man whose music could touch hearts, whose story could motivate others, and whose journey was a reminder that the greatest victories often come from the quiet persistence of those who refuse to give up. Through every note, every melody, and every performance, Ethan proved that passion and perseverance could triumph over doubt, ridicule, and fear, leaving a lasting impact on everyone who heard his music.